Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Andrew Key, the Chairman of the committee, and the Vice Chairman, Councillor Paul Skinner, is also in attendance. Can I remind you that this meeting is being hopefully broadcast live via the County Council's website. And with that in mind, I'd like to welcome members of the public listening or watching this live, with apologies for the late start to the meeting due to some technical difficulties we're having. As this meeting is being streamed in the usual way, I'd like to remind you all here that your comments will remain accessible online and can be reported by the media. I'd like to begin with health and safety. There's no fire drill planned for this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park and wait there. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of the meeting, and also that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. When invited to speak, press the button on your microphone unit to make it live, then press it again when you've finished. We'll now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence and replacement councillors. Over to Emily.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Austin, Councillor Sneath, and we have Councillor Sear as a replacement, and Councillor Gray, and we have Councillor Dyer as a replacement.
Thanks, Emily. Item 2, declarations of councillors' interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest today? No. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 24th of September. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 24th of September 2024 as a correct record. They can be found on pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack. Do we have a proposer, please? Councillor Pepper, seconder. Councillor here, Paul Skinner. And can we all now vote, please? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. That's all passed. So, item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. I'll start. So, members of the committee were invited to 2 Lincoln Museum engagement events which were held on the 28th and 29th of October. I attended on the 28th, and it was very interesting to hear the plans for the museum. Unfortunately, neither event was well attended by committee members. Could I remind members that if you were invited to attend an event, to please provide a definite response as to whether you will be attending or not, so that officers can plan accordingly. That's the end of that ticking off. Officers are reminded to take their reports as read by committee members and are requested to summarise the key points from their report in about 5 minutes. Members are also reminded of the importance of succinct questions and contributions. As always, the question should be shorter than the answer. Just to make everybody aware, I may suggest that we have a 5-minute comfort break before item 10 today, depending on the time that we reach that item. So we'll go on to Executive Councillor announcements, and Councillor Corey is here.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I want to thank you for your the statement you just made, and thank you that you found the event valuable. Just to pick up on your point, though, hopefully we will be holding another event, because it is quite a large amount of money for culture services to be spending on the refurb of Lincoln Museum. It is quite an extensive refurbishment, so we will be putting another event on. We do want to keep members engaged. It is the kind of thing that you are scrutinising. So I'm not going to tick you off. The chairman did that. I'm just going to extend an invitation to you again that we will be holding another such event. So please do come along, because it is actually really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, I couldn't make it. Just a couple of things, really. I think if you offer a couple of dates, which you did on that occasion, I think that always helps. But the Monday one actually clashed with Transport Board. So maybe look in the diary as well and make sure there are no meeting clashes. But if there's another one, I'd like to go.
Yes, thank you. It was very useful. We have people from the museum here today. There's not much, I don't think, to see at the moment there, perhaps, but once things are sorted out, it would be great for people to go and have another look. Oh, now everybody's coming in now. Councillor Pepper.
Thank you, Chairman. I did attend, as you're probably aware, and it was a very worthwhile, very worthwhile event, and I'm really pleased I travelled the distance. But I think what I'm really saying, I wasn't one of the naughty ones who didn't attend.
No, you are let off. Councillor Clark, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I found it very interesting, even though I did the link via Teams. I was tied up the day before with the Transport Board, but I found it very interesting, and I think it's going to be a real asset for the whole community within the county. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. That's great. Everybody's positive. So any other Executive Councillor announcements? Councillor Sue Woolley, Councillor Stephen Rowe, Councillor Daniel McNally.
No, thank you.
No
Thank
more.
you.
Lovely. Any announcements from senior officers, please? No? Okay. So moving on to the main items of business, we will first sit as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee under Section 19 of the Crime and Justice Act 2006 for item 5 on the agenda, which is the Domestic Abuse Safe Accommodation Recommissioning. This report, which is on pages 15 to 52 of the agenda pack, is for pre-decision scrutiny prior to a decision by the Executive on the 3rd of December this year. Due to the sensitive nature of this item, can I please ask members not to ask questions about the locations of the accommodation in the county, as this is confidential information. The actions required by the committee are to consider the attached report and determine whether the committee supports the recommendations to the Executive as set out in the report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Jade Thursby, Domestic Abuse Business Manager, and Carl Miller, Senior Strategic Commercial and Procurement Manager. We also have Martin Parker, Assistant Director of Public Protection, in attendance to help answer any questions. So over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As I'm sure everybody has had a chance to read the report, it's quite a detailed report, so I will obviously very carefully, hopefully, do my best to summarise it. As Councillor Key said, this is around the recommissioning of our safe accommodation services for Lincolnshire. The current contract ends on the 30th of June, with the new one due to start on the 1st of July next year. This contract is solely for the provision of the support within that accommodation. The accommodation is acquired through working with local housing providers through the provider that is successful in coming forward to run this service. There's been an extensive review as part of the recommissioning. We've undertaken, looked at service delivery, performance against our current contract measures. We've undertaken stakeholder engagement with survivors, partners and others within the community. And we've done a number of benchmarking activities as well, looking at what other areas are also doing in this area. In terms of this provision, is a statutory duty for Tier 1 local authorities only to provide this support. And within the Domestic Abuse Act that was introduced in 2021, there's a very detailed explanation of what that safe accommodation should be and what the support within that safe accommodation should be as well. There is an appendix on the report for further information with regards to that. In terms of the funding for this, for the last 3 years through the Domestic Abuse Act, there has been funding allocated for safe accommodation services, and that funding intends to cover the costs of this new pre-procurement. In terms of that funding, it's been consistent over the last 3 years, the amount, and that's included in the report. And we're looking at obviously what that will be for the following year. We haven't had the final announcement from the government yet, obviously with it being a new government, but we assume because of their manifesto and what their commitments towards domestic abuse that will be very similar and in line with the last 3 years that we've had in place. So just moving forward, you'll see that, again, in the work that we did, the review work that we undertook, and speaking to our service users, our survivors in Lincolnshire, what we have found is there's some key elements of development we want to take forward within the new contract. So it's really important that we have a varied range of safe accommodation. So we've looked at that, not just being refuges. There is also now, and looking for the future, a mix of dispersed accommodation, move-on accommodation, which is kind of second stage accommodation, and also we're proposing specialist emergency accommodation, and also increasing our specialist children's workers within Lincolnshire. That is very much in line with the Domestic Abuse Act and the new requirements in there around children, and recognises them as victims of domestic abuse in their own right, and making sure we've got the right support for them in Lincolnshire. And in terms of the emergency specialist accommodation, that is looking very much at supporting single women with complex needs that really aren't suitable for our normal refuge spaces. So it's about creating something where that cohort of people can be supported in the most effective way. And we're also, really importantly, looking at this new contract, looking at local referral pathways, ensuring that our Lincolnshire residents are benefiting from our safe accommodation services. There's a lot of information there about the background of the contract. I'm not going to go through all of that because it's there for people to see. And obviously the impact of domestic abuse, just a couple of lines here. You know, annually there are approximately 30,000 Lincolnshire residents aged 16 to 74 years who are victims of domestic abuse. On average, in the past 5 years, there's been over 10,000 domestic abuse incidences reported to Lincolnshire Police each year, with a slight increase last year. That went up to 12,500. And since the introduction of the domestic abuse homicide reviews in April 21, we've had 35 cases involving 45 deaths in Lincolnshire that have been reviewed or are ongoing being reviewed within Lincolnshire. And domestic abuse is the single most prevalent assessment factor identified in children's social care assessments. Again, there's a lot of detail in there about the current service, and it's just to reassure people that over the last 3 years since the Domestic Abuse Act came into enactment, we have been improving that service and working with the current provider, doing contract variations. So currently what we have in Lincolnshire is 3 refuges suitable for 28 adults and their children. We have 8 dispersed properties, each suitable to accommodate also male adult individuals, as well as families, larger families with male dependents, and also 6 move-on units. So what we're looking to do, obviously, for the next contract is develop that even further. I think in terms of the work that we've done, I will pass over to Carl in a moment to talk about the commercial approach as well to this contract. But other than that, in terms of the investment, this is an increased investment that we're making, obviously, in this service due to the needs assessment that we've undertaken and what we've identified. This is very much in line with our joint health and wellbeing strategy and works towards priorities for homes for independence and mental health and dementia. There's also been you'll see as part of the bundle on the report, there's been an equality impact assessment undertaken as well for information. And it's also very much a direct contribution to Section 17 of our obligations through the partnership working under the Crime and Disorder Act. So in conclusion, before I pass over to Carl, the reprocurement of the domestic abuse service is required and is in direct response to the local authority's statutory responsibilities within the DA Act and also the domestic abuse statutory framework. The service links very much with the local authority's corporate plan around supporting high aspirations and enabling anyone to live their lives to the full. And as I said, there's a number of elements that through the commercial work we've had that corroboration that actually this is a really important piece of work and that those areas of development are very much needed. So I'll now pass over to Carl.
Thank you, Jade. Taking account of the findings from the market and other engagement and review activities completed, it's proposed that the new contract will be for an initial term of 5 years, with potential for extension up to a further 2 years. That longer contract will provide some stability to realise the newly focused outcomes arising from the DA Act and associated guidance, and will give some flexibility to extend the contract if the service is performing well at the end of the initial term. A single provider delivery model is proposed to continue, that to support economies of scale in delivery of the services, consistency in the quality of delivery, and to increase the focus of the funding on the frontline support aspects of the service. Participation by SME and VCSE organisations will still be enabled through consortia and subcontracting delivery approaches. Payment for the new contract will be by way of a block payment approach, and as part of the pricing submitted at tender stage, a breakdown of delivery costs will be required. That will enable us to undertake open book monitoring of delivery costs through contract operation. Contract will also include price indexation to support competition and to ensure that the market isn't required to factor that inflation risk into their solutions and proposals at tender stage. The expectations for the housing provider and support provider relationship, which is very important as part of the new service, will be clearly set out in the specification to help improve the council's ability to influence the availability, quality and maintenance of the refuge and move on accommodation provided through it. And that market engagement activity is ongoing to seek to influence the participation and engagement of the specialist housing provider market in the tender process, with the aim really of maximising the level of participation and competition by making those connections between local housing providers and interested support providers, some of whom may not be familiar with or currently operating in the area. As Jade has said, the review works did identify some gaps in the current provision that are proposed to be addressed through the new service. I won't cover those again. Just briefly to finish, in terms of performance management for the new contracts, a new performance schedule is being developed in line with the new specification to ensure the impact of the service can be closely measured alongside the collection of management information to inform the ongoing development and management of the services through the new contract. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think it's the number of noughts on the end of those figures for the victims and the reports of domestic violence that is very sobering for us this morning. Right, any speakers then, please? Jackie.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for this report. It's very interesting, and I particularly found useful all the statutory information that you gave us at the end. That was very helpful, actually. I understand that this paper is about procurement, really, rather than the actual service itself. However, I do have a question about the relationship between the two. On page 18, it says that, bullet point 1, says that funding, we've got to ensure that funding levels are sufficient to cover the growing needs of domestic abuse victims. That's fine. But when we go on to 22, it's clear that our provision of safe beds is very, very much lower than the rest of the country. I mean, hugely lower, not just a little bit. So I really would like some reassurance. First of all, how many extra beds are we going to bring in? So are we aiming to double it, triple it? We're 4.9 and the national average is 28.5. Not sure how we can actually accept that at all. It's very low. So my question on that point would be, is there sufficient leeway in this contract to raise that? If more and more people are fleeing, and I know they are because there's a service in Lincoln which I help out occasionally, and the numbers do appear to be going up quite a lot with men and women having to flee. So how far are you going to take those available beds up? Now, I can see further on in the report that you are aware that this needs to be increased and that you're looking at it, but can I have a bit more detail, if possible, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we've tried to strike a balance, obviously, in the procurement and look at the needs for Lincolnshire. So, obviously, whilst our beds are, on average, lower, and they are in line with some other local authorities, so it's not just us that has that level. It's that some are very much outliers in terms of the national average. However, what we've tried to do is focus on the needs for Lincolnshire, so that cohort of women that are complex, with complex needs, that are presenting to services and currently are struggling to get the right support in terms of accommodation. So we've focused on that and the increase in investment on that, and that will create more bed spaces in Lincolnshire, rather than our generic refuge spaces, because actually what we have in Lincolnshire is very sufficient for the demand that we're having. And actually we're not turning people away. And I think also as well in context is that a number of those people that are being supported in Lincolnshire are out of our county, so they're from out of our county, which is how the refuge service works. It's how it works across the country. So it's like I say, bearing in mind that, striking the balance of making sure we're a part of that national system, supplying refuges that support people, and other authorities then do that for us in terms of Lincolnshire residents, but also then focusing locally on those real individual needs for Lincolnshire, like that extra support around complex needs, increasing the children's support as well, and creating that local referral system. So that's where the investment is focused on in Lincolnshire.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Oh, Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in addition to that, so Jay's absolutely right that we're contributing to the national, almost a national picture of support around those, and I don't like to use the word normal, but that kind of standardised service around refuge. But what's really, really clear, and one of the Lincolnshire specialities is our ability to house children and large families. And I think we are 4%, we're one of the top 4% local authorities who kind of take children and families. So whilst we might not be huge in terms of our ratio, in terms of bed allocation, actually how we sit into a national system of supporting families and children, we're one of the top tier authorities that enable that. So I think that's really clear. It's about how we fit into a national system. It's not necessarily about the availability of bed space. And as Jay says, you know, we don't have any backlogs or difficulty in getting people into refuges.
Could I just ask on that same point, really? What do we have any figures as to the utilisation of our bed spaces? You know, how much are they filled up all the time?
I don't know if Carl wants to take that, but we do measure utilisation of bed spaces, and I know the target within the contract currently is 85%, and we have always been within that kind of provision. So, but again, as part of the new contract, I'm sure Carl will have some comments about how we might be monitoring that going forward.
Yes, absolutely. The target is 85%, and we are in excess of that currently. So the utilisation is good, but there are things that we can do to improve that utilisation, including the turnover of the accommodation, and that's why the relationship between the housing provider and the support provider is key to help to facilitate that quick turnover, and that's going to be an area of focus in the new contract. And again, that utilisation is going to be remaining a focus for monitoring of effective service delivery through the new contract as well.
Thank you. Karen, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. Jackie asked most of the questions I was going to ask, actually. But no, it's fine. I wanted to ask as well, without asking the specific location, I'm really not asking that. Are these places located in such a way that people aren't having to travel? Although I can appreciate that some might want to travel a long way away from home. What I'm saying really is the provision in each location adequate to what people want and need?
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the accommodation is distributed across the county, and that's going to be also part of the specification, very clear that we want it distributed, not just in one location. They all have to be close to travel points, so easy to access via public transport, close to amenities, doctors, surgeries, shops, etc., and community provisions, schools. So making sure that they're not isolated, because going from one horrible isolated situation to another is obviously not what we're trying to achieve. It's about kind of bringing people into the community and building them and developing them so they can live independently.
Yeah, that was what I was getting at. And I did expect the answer that you gave me. But what I was sort of getting at was there's not sort of one that's oversubscribed and one that's undersubscribed. It's fairly evenly balanced.
So it works as a county system. So we, in terms of the new contract, very much so, we're even making that even clearer that actually the refugees, the dispersed accommodation, there'll be one central point by which referrals will come into, and then they'll be distributed amongst obviously the available accommodation that we have. So there won't be, like say, one refuge that's completely bursting at the seams with not a lot of space. We'll make sure that that's distributed evenly across the county.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I asked the same question earlier of Jade, and I think you answered that really well in the bounds of what you can say, so thank you. Tom, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a training session last year on domestic abuse and how it works nationally and the system, and it's eye-opening actually, just what goes on behind the scenes to support people, and getting somebody to raise the alarm bells that they're a victim of domestic abuse. It's that's a really big first stage for somebody to make, and one of those barriers is fear for their children, that if they have to flee, they want to be assured that their children can come with them. So I was pleased to hear in the report that within the refuges, you've mentioned that 28 adult bed spaces, and that was, you mentioned it verbally as well in your report, that includes children. Is there a limit, an upper limit on how many children a victim can take with them? And I think within this, and if I've read it correctly, and I think if my knowledge, not to get into specifics, knowledge of refuges more general is correct, is that there's a lot of female refuges in the country, but there is a shortage, I may be wrong, on refuges for males, and that will also be males being able to take their children with them, and that's a national shortage. Am I correct in that? So my questions really is there an upper limit on how many children can go? And if a victim in Lincolnshire wants to take their children with them, other than the dispersed properties that are mentioned here, are there any other routes for males to take their children with them? And finally, and it's within the report, and you've mentioned, of course, I've just mentioned it, it's that victims can take their children with them. And I haven't seen within the report a definition of the upper age limit on children, because of course these people are victims and abusers, and if they're going to a refuge and somebody's taking potentially their quite teenage children with them, that might be a trigger or a risk for the other people in the refuge. So is there an upper age on a child that can come with a victim because of the reasons that I've just set out? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll hopefully remember all those questions. That's okay. I'll start with the one about the upper limit. There is an occupancy limit. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'm really sorry, but we have recently just done some work around that. So I do know, and that's how we've worked out actually our ratios in terms of the number of children that we've supported in the last 3 years, and then the increase that we need in terms of workers. So we've used that actual data to help us inform what we need going forward. So whilst I can't remember that off the top of my head, we have been working on that. There is an upper limit. However, for example, we've got people in Lincolnshire where they've got 4 or 5 children with them. We don't put a limit on the number of children that people can, move into refuge or move into dispersed accommodation. We'll find the appropriate accommodation for them. To do that. We are lucky that our refuges are really well, got really good provision in terms of that, and they've got enough space to do that. So hopefully that answers your question around the children element. And then I think in terms of the male victims and children, it is really difficult because obviously we can't have a mixed gender refuge, because that wouldn't be fair for people. People wouldn't feel safe in that environment. So what we do make sure is that our dispersed and our second stage move on accommodation is equipped to be able to take male victims and their children, and then also sometimes female victims with older male dependents as well. So it's really, again, making sure that and what we will do is, if we need to, we will move people around where appropriate and also where safe to do that, to make that available for people. And then the rest of the country works very similar, you know, so when people potentially are in Lincolnshire that need to move out of Lincolnshire, need to flee, that's a similar process that would happen elsewhere. I do think we've got a really good provision though for Lincolnshire to be able to do that. And then in terms of the law, obviously a child is classed as under 18, so there isn't an upper age limit. If they're 18 would be our normal limit in terms of male dependents. However, if a family, if a victim needed that support and there was a child that was older than that, 19, 20, 21, because obviously we know people don't just suddenly become adults at 18 and leave home and become independent, do we? So actually that support would be looked at on an individual case-by-case basis. And again, that would be monitored through the commercial team and supported through the commercial team. So it's not a definite no, there is no space for people. It would be, we would work with them on that.
Thank you. Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your report. It still shocks me that we have so much abuse within the country, and certainly within Lincolnshire. I was quite taken aback actually reading all the figures. On page 18, under the recommendations, you mentioned the contract and the whole life value. Is that for the 5-year period or the 7-year period? Because otherwise, I think over 7 years, we might be shortchanging. Thank you.
That whole life value in the recommendation is the full potential contract value, so the 7 years potentially.
Okay, going back in the report, further up, it gives some figures for 24-25, and you've given a value of 1.5 million. But if you sort of mount that up, to me that looks like it's about 10 million, and you're saying you're going to get a contract for 7. Could you possibly explain that to me? Thank you.
Yes, sorry, good question. Those figures above are the total allocated funding that we get from the Domestic Abuse Act. So where you've got the 1.4 million, that's what we've got on an annual basis for the last 3 years, 1.4, 1.4, 1.5 for the last 3 years. And then the 7 million, etc., is for the cost of what this service will cost, because the DA Act has to fund other things as well. It's not just this service. There's other elements of the statutory duty within the DA Act that we need to fund out of that 1.4 million. So this part will cost over 7 years, 7.5 million, which is detailed in here. But those figures above are for the allocation that we get in total each year.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. It is clear now. Very, very good. Thank you. Just if I could just ask, and then I'll bring Anton in. He's got a question. Just to do with the fact that this is an external delivery of the service, are we sure that there is a big enough market of suppliers to make sure that we get value for money with, you know, have we got enough to pick from, basically? Thank you.
I mean, yes, we're confident, based on the level of engagement we've had through the market engagement, that, you know, there will be competition for these services. It is a specialist market, but there's a number of interested organisations, and we believe that, you know, we should get a good level of competition through this tender process.
Thank you, Carl. Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's a very sensitive, I think, subject, because in my past I have witnessed, you know, domestic abuse. I have reported, and there is 2 questions which I would like to ask. Because a domestic abuse was reported to the police, however, they didn't deal with it because the person who was abused didn't want to press charges, so they just left it. And it's really make me upset. I wasn't very happy with that. So I thought that the police, they will do their work, but they didn't. That's one thing. The second thing, which is, I'm gonna give a question from that. How do you get the data at the number of domestic abuse from the police? Because they must be involved in that. That's one question. The second thing is that we all agree that the domestic abuse is, the figures are getting higher and higher all the time. And in my opinion, what's the solution? Because if it goes higher, then it will put a lot of pressure on our financials. So we need more money to deal with the issue. That's why I think we should probably start working on solution and how we can deal with the issue. Thank you.
I'm going to let Martin answer the police questions, and then I'm going to answer the other bits at the end. Is that all right, Martin?
So we have we have data sharing agreements with police in place as a working partnership. So we regularly share information in terms of the volumes, but it's also actually part of policing's national reporting data anyway out into the general public. So you can go onto the gov.uk site in terms of the police site, and you can get your localised domestic abuse data, so it's there. And Lincolnshire Police also publish that data openly. So in terms of their own Links Police website, they'll also give the kind of domestic abuse rate. So the numbers are freely available and are part of open and kind of an open source search. So that there's nothing being hidden in terms of the Lincolnshire numbers. In terms of trying to respond around what we're doing, obviously the refuge, this contract in terms of safe accommodation is part of the safety mechanisms for trying to support and help and stop repeat victimisation. So that's, this in itself, by itself, is one sort of active tool in the toolkit to help reduce certainly the repeat victimisation of domestic abuse. But I'll let Jade talk through some of the wider elements that the Lincolnshire Domestic Abuse Partnership is doing, because it's there is plenty of activity and tools that are taking place that we are in partnership doing, and it's not solely a police problem. What I will say to Councillor Danny, that if he has any concerns where he feels that the police have not dealt with something appropriately, then there is a police complaints mechanism that he can report into. That again, he can find the details on the Lincolnshire Police website. So where that is a legitimate and open resource for anybody to use if they feel that something is not being dealt with properly.
Thank you. Just to add, in terms of, I think the reporting around incidents of domestic abuse, obviously we've seen that has gone up slightly from the police records, police incidents last year. But I think actually what's happening is that people are actually getting the right support. And so we're seeing more people come into services, into refuge, into our outreach and engagement services through LDAS in Lincolnshire, but that's because they're seeking support and actually getting support, and that's what we want. So whilst that may be increasing, that's really, really important that people are getting the right level of support and getting referred to the right agencies. What we're doing in terms of the Lincolnshire Partnership, there is a full strategy, and actually the new strategy is due to be published in January, which will come to this group as well. So you'll be able to see what we're doing in Lincolnshire, and it's extensive what we're doing. But there's a lot of early intervention in terms of working with schools and schools education through the Stay Safe team around healthy relationships. There's a lot of professional and practitioner education and training that's being developed, and being delivered throughout the county, working again with schools, early years as well. There's also the work that we do in terms of our multi-agency risk assessment conference, and then the multi-agency work that we do where we're identifying incidences that don't meet that threshold, but actually looking at how we can work together as partners to identify abuse earlier than the systems do. So there's a number of elements that we have in Lincolnshire, but like I say, that strategy will give you a really good idea what the next 3 years and what we're going to be aiming for and working on when we bring that back in January.
Thank you. And an increase in demand, of course, is not necessarily a bad thing, because it probably means people aren't suffering in silence. So, and I am told that the recent television programme that the Queen was involved with is well worth watching. I haven't seen it yet myself, but it's things like that which will hopefully allow more people to come forward. So thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. Our comments from today's discussion have been recorded by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, for passing on to the Executive. I propose that the committee supports the recommendations to the Executive, and we agree to pass on our comments. So can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sear. And all those in favour, please? Anybody against? Any abstentions? No, all that's unanimous. So we're going to revert now to sitting as the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee for the remainder of the meeting and move on to item 6, which is the service level performance reporting against the Success Framework Quarter 2. This can be found on pages 53 to 82 of the agenda pack and reflects on the performance achieved in Quarter 2 that's relevant to community safety, coroners and registrations, trading standards, fire safety, libraries and heritage, road safety and volunteering. And this is one of the reasons I love this committee so much, because we get something of everything. So our actions are to review and comment on the performance for Quarter 2. Instead of inviting officers to present their section of the report, I'll take the report as read and invite members of the committee to ask questions on each section in turn. We have a number of officers in attendance to help answer any questions you might have. So let's start with community safety, pages 54 to 56. Community safety. Nobody got a question. Oh, Councillor Lee.
Into question, it's a comment. After the last report that we had about Stay Safe, I did a Teams meeting with Catherine and I found it really interesting, finding out where they delivered it in my area and what they were delivering and everything. And I'd recommend it to other people. It only took about less than an hour, but it was just really helpful and gave you an insight, you know, a deeper insight into what's going on locally. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things we want to work on is actually communicate better into all council members in terms of where we are, you know, where we are involved in the schools and the volume. So we kind of break it down to a more localised level so you can understand it better. So we are looking at that. But thank you for kind of taking the initiative to have that call, because I think it is useful for you to understand what is being done and what is being delivered in the schools within your area.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll move on to coroners and registrations, pages 56 to 58. Before I ask for comments, it was agreed at our September meeting that an update on the medical examiner process would be provided to the committee when considering this report. So I know Martin hopefully is ready for this. Could you provide us with an update on the introduction of the medical examiner process and the impact it's had? Because obviously in my job that I do outside of this chamber, I know it did have an impact to begin with. So perhaps you can update us, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say it is an improving position, which is really, really positive. So just by way of sort of update is that the process changed on the 9th of September, where the medical examiner would effectively scrutinise and review the certificate of death notification reports, and then have a sort of a two-way sort of conversation with the GPs or whoever it was certifying the death. That was in order to kind of reduce volumes that were coming into the coroner and also reduce the mistakes that were coming into the registrations. What we'd experienced is a significant reduction in notifications of death coming into the registration service that would then cause delays further on down the system of actually being able to register the deaths. I'm really pleased to say that so in September in registrations we received 574 death registrations. That has significantly increased in October to 763, which is the highest registered deaths that we've ever had in an October month. So we can see that within the data that's involved some of probably what was in the backlog for the September dates. So there's been a significant improvement in terms of clearing some of those backlogs. We also know that the ICB have asked for some additional support in terms of administration, in terms of being able to run that process. So all things seem positive. So in terms of a year-to-date view, for year-to-date 23-24 at this stage, we'd registered 4,765 deaths, and we're now currently at 4,759 for 24-25. So we are currently still in line. So at the moment, it looks like with the October month, we've rebalanced those numbers because they've dealt with some of the backlogs. In terms of the coroner's referrals, we would normally see on average about 200 referrals into the coroners per month. We're now at an average, certainly for October, of 144 referrals. So again, a significant impact of what we would have expected the ME to be doing, which is effectively, challenging is the wrong word, but kind of referring back to those that were certifying the death to give a
Well, thank you everyone and welcome back to the meeting. Anybody who's listening can't see us online, and we have just had a fire drill here at the council, but all is well. So we'll now reconvene, and Martin, I think, was speaking when we broke off, and then I think Lindsay wants to come in, and so does Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so just to finish, so the ME process is in a much better place. I know previously we've asked around our target in terms of registration of deaths within the 5-day process. So historically we were always registering at about 34% on average as a result of the delays prior to the documentation coming to us. Under the change in the process, we're now at 89% complete. The national target is actually 95, so we're a little bit below that, but as a rural county, obviously choice comes into that, so people can choose not to do it within the 5 days, and also because we work a kind of a flexible opening system, it's quite challenging in a rural place, but we're certainly closer to the 95 required percentage that is the national target than the previous 34, so really pleased with the improvements that's been made.
Thank you, Martin. You knew I was going to ask you about that, didn't you? So I don't need to now. Lindsay.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to invite the Chief Fire Officer to explain himself.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. First of all, thank you everybody for your response on hearing the fire alarm and evacuating the building. Just to inform you, we had a faulty detector head within the council buildings at the fire crew, who turned up in well within their allotted time frame. So I was really pleased to see them on their response standards, and they quickly identified which was a faulty detector and fixed that problem for us now. So thank everybody for their support.
Thank you, Mark. That's scrutiny in action, but I'm pleased all is well. Tom.
Thank you. So we can blame property services for that one there, not fire and rescue. It's good actually though, the timing, because just talking about, you know, fire and rescue performance, and they turned up really quickly, so well done. Registration, let me just find my place within the report. Should have done this, I've had enough time. It was just to compliment you actually. We've just had the pleasure of having to register a birth. And it's not long ago that we had to register a birth as well, and I was quite amazed actually that just how in the last couple of years the availability of appointments has significantly improved. I think I tried to book one, and I could have had one the next day, which was fantastic. Just from my point of view, one of my bugbears with local authorities, and it's particularly with the children's services side of things, they're still sending out letters, paper letters to young families, whereas this service, it was all done online, all done on the website. There was no posting out, so I thought it was efficient, quick service, no complaints at all. My question would be, obviously it's 98%, so it's not quite 100, so if we're going to be nitpicky, what's the problem there with 2%, and how can we get that to 100, or can we get that to 100?
I don't think we'll ever hit the 100, because again it's down to choice and sometimes the delays in terms of the parents being availability and our access to them. You know, so it's a really small number, and it's our rurality and our access to get to the people. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was going to ask a question about the 2% as well. What sort of penalties, or how long do you chase people, or don't you ever find out if someone hasn't registered a birth or doesn't want to register a birth?
There's no penalties, but we do register all the births that are required within Lincolnshire. This is just a target that's within the 42 days to register that. As Councillor Dyer says, we do continually chase. So we have a digital system where we are digitally notifying the parents and the families of, you know, that you need to come in and register. This is how you do it. This is the information that we'll need. We work with children's services and hospitals who actually provide us the data in terms of those people that are born. So again, you know, there's a kind of a whole system communication around the birth. So we get well ahead of the game in terms of being able to notify people and guide them through the process of how they register. So whilst whilst the 42 days is a national measure in terms of wanting children to be registered, births to be registered, but eventually they will all be registered.
Oh, Councillor Lee, Karen.
I might have missed this, sorry, because I've been looking at this as well as listening. You said it was all online. What if people, and I'm not knocking that, that's fine, but what if they haven't got digital access? Do they get a letter as well?
Yeah, we use the standardised process. So if we get a notification or a referral where it hasn't got the details of a phone or an email where we can digitally contact them, we'll contact them in the standard way.
Lovely, thank you. Well, we'll move on then now to pages 59 and 60, which is trading standards. Trading standards. Paul.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Really interested to ask where are the hot spots in the county? I mean, obviously Boston has seen quite a few shops closed. Particularly the one in the marketplace, where one week the council were helping them with the signage and the next week it's closed by yourselves. Is Boston actually one of the hot spots? I know these cases do take a long time to pull together, but are we just particularly lucky in Boston that they've been prominent places, or is it going on all the time? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. All of the towns in Lincolnshire are hotspots. So we've done enforcement activity just as much in Grantham, Skegness, Spalding, Lincoln. So Lincoln was subject to 4 or 5 closures only a couple of weeks ago. Grantham had 4 or 5 closures the couple of weeks before that. So it's unfortunately at the moment an ever revolving door of activity from trade and standards, police, immigration. One of the elements that we are looking at, and you'll see in the report that I think there was 11 closure orders in this period, of 5 of which were repeat closure premises. So it's actually now targeting and looking at the landlords of those premises, because actually there's got to be something that they've got to do in terms of their due diligence about who they're renting their shops out to, and actually who's taking on that. So there's got to be some sort of responsibility and ownership around premises that landlords have. So we're starting to look at that, and we're utilising sort of best practice that's come from other places within the country to help us in terms of what legislation we may be used to target landlords. So we stop this kind of revolving door. But in terms of your hotspot question, it's the main towns that are within our county all have a prevalence of the illicit tobacco, the illicit alcohol trade.
Thank you for that, Martin. I was just going to ask if there are any links between the towns, because that might be prevalent as well.
Yeah, we certainly deem the activity that we are doing contributing to tackling organised crime groups. So there are organised crime groups that are operating within this trade that we are targeting, and this is one of the many measures that we as a local authority through trade and standards are contributing, assisting the police and the wider system in terms of tackling that. So there are links between the shops, there are links between who are organising it. It's just really, really challenging to make those links. But that's why we get this revolving door, and people who are allowing this to happen, we need to take a closer look at so we can stop that happening. But yeah, there are links, and we are fairly satisfied that we are contributing to the disruption of organised criminality.
Thank you, Martin. Now, Jackie, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a quick question about the punishments that are meted out. So you have actually touched on this. The punishments on page 59 are very variable, and I would have thought one of the most effective would be to hit them in the pocket, which has been done in paragraph 2 with some defendants. But when you're talking about things like overnight curfew, that's difficult to enforce because it's possible for people to sneak out unless they've got these tags and things on. Do we as an authority have any influence at all on the punishments that are meted out, so that we can sort of say, well, this one appears to be more effective than that one? Do we have anything at all where we can influence that? Thank you.
Unfortunately not. So, having, people will know my history in terms of 30 years in policing, and I'd have loved to have influenced sentencings from judges and magistrates and court, but that's a matter for the Ministry of Justice, and it's not something we can influence. We can certainly feedback where we feel that something has been either not sentenced correctly, but you know, usually they are the high-profile cases that you see that's in the news, and not necessarily the lower cases where it warrants a challenge. So we're very much at the behest of those that are within the courts that are issuing, because they will have a set of guidelines that goes from a kind of a lower tier to an upper tier that they have to comply with, and it's all through the kind of sentencing authority. So we don't have an ability to influence the judgment. We may on occasion have an ability to challenge that.
Thank you, Martin. Nigel, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a question about the non-compliance toys. I'm just thinking, with Christmas looming, lots of toys will be purchased, and interested to know, you know, what these non-compliant toys are. Also, how dangerous some of them might be, and where do people purchase them from? Is it just markets, or is it shops as well?
So the easy answer is that they are bought online, at markets, and in stores. It's across the board. What I can do is I will get you a wider breakdown of what those non-compliant toys are, but we will certainly be doing some active awareness campaigning prior to Christmas to raise the awareness in terms of what is and what isn't, and what people should and consumers should look out for. In terms of what the 157 non-compliant toys are, I don't have the specific details, but I can get that back and feed that into you.
Thank you, Martin. Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, it's part of the report on page 59. I was very pleased to read that some of the landlords are actually being cooperative now and evicting quite a few of their tenants. I'm pleased to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anton, finally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the reality is that a pack of cigarettes now is around £16. So a lot of people, they cannot afford it. So therefore, I think the increase of selling illegal cigarettes and alcohol, it will increase. My question is, what's the impact on the personnel around Lincolnshire to deal with this issue, especially you just stated, all Lincolnshire is a very hot spot now for these things. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, so are you asking what are we doing in terms of the illicit trade in its totality? Sorry.
My question is, what's the impact on the personnel, on the people working on the ground, basically? We will have to increase, or we are happy with the numbers we have now? That's my...
Yeah, we're looking to see how we can increase that prosecutions team and how we can utilise certainly public health funding in terms of the tobacco cessation elements that we do get some funding through public health. So we've got currently a couple of business cases in terms of trying to get the funding through that to increase our educational piece in particular. But we're also still working closely with neighbourhood policing teams and immigration teams and our trade and standards team, working as a kind of whole system where they genuinely deserve significant credit for the amount of activity that's actually been taking place in the areas that they've been working, because it's long hours, it's difficult prosecutions, but at the moment we've got the resourcing right to be able to target the relevant premises, but we can always have more and do more, and we are putting in some business cases, certainly through the tobacco cessation, to try and get more.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you. Quickly, please, Anton.
Yes. The other thing which is I would like to mention is that there is a lot of people selling illegal cigarettes from their homes. Can you give us an insight on that, please?
Yeah, we don't get too much intelligence in relation to that. So again, it's a plea out to those that are listening and those that are, that if you are aware or within your community that is happening, we deal with and react on the information that we receive. So if it's unknown to us as a service, then we're not likely to do anything about it, and it might be one of those hidden elements. So I'd plead councillors in to assist. If you think or know or understand it's happening within your area, or know people who may know about it, then please have them contact us, and they can do that anonymously through Crime Stoppers if they feel that's the appropriate way. But it's not something that I've seen within our intelligence reports as being flagged up into the service.
Thank you, Martin. Well, I think that's the end of that section, so we'll move on to fire safety, pages 60 to 71. Any questions on fire safety? We proved this morning that they can meet their call-out times. So any more questions? Nigel.
Yeah, it's pleasing to see quite a considerable increase in the number of secondary fires, and I can see why grassland fires may be down because of weather conditions, etc. I'm interested to know why there's such a decrease in refuse and refuse container fires. Maybe you don't know, perhaps just a coincidence, but I just wanted to know your thoughts, if I could, please.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, first of all, it's a positive reduction in regards to the amount of refuse fires that we're going to. In regards to the analysis there, I'll have to bring back some more details in regards to where that will be and where that's from. We know we did have a trend of an increase from the COVID years that was a legacy that continued after that, where we were still seeing an increase in refuse fires, which were linked into fly tipping areas, and there was a slight trend in regards to wheelie bins being used in regards to setting fires near domestic dwellings. But to be honest, I will have to come back with you the specific data and the breakdown of where those refuse fires will come to give you that answer.
Thank you. Mark, could I just ask you, this is a discussion that we've had ourselves, the home fire safety visits to households who have vulnerable occupants. It's obviously a very high target, which we're not quite meeting. Perhaps you could explain a bit more about that, because this is a discussion I know we've had.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, really useful just to probably outline why we set the target and what we're trying to achieve from that. So in regards to our home fire safety visits, we are actively prioritising our highest vulnerable people. So we set the target of 90% of all of our home fire safety visits will be at our most vulnerable people. How we do this, we approach this through our own targeted approach, where we use multi-layered data sets that identify where our high-risk vulnerable people live. And we also utilise partner referrals that come in from partner agencies, and when they're going about doing their duties, that they identify a high-risk vulnerable person that comes in, and then we'll respond to those as well. But we also do a significant amount of what we call post-fire visits. So if we do have an incident in a local area of a domestic fire, we will actively we'd send our crews out, and they will do home fire safety visits in the surrounding area of where that fire was, just to raise the awareness and make sure that we can make sure that everybody has fire detectors and have got the same level of support. Particularly within those post-fire visits, they're not targeted. A high percentage of those may not fit within our highest vulnerable people. However, they are still really valuable visits that count towards our activities. We also know within our partner referrals, they are averaging around about 90% of them are within our high risk areas. So again, we are proactively working with our partners, really through our Sherman concept of getting people to understand they are what we class as our high risk vulnerable people. So the blended approach is a very high level target we've set ourselves, 90%. At the moment, we are over 8 out of 10 of our visits are within our high-risk vulnerable people, and our latest month's figures, which will be outside of the reporting figures here, are over 90% as well now. So we are having an increase, improvement in regards to our meeting our targets for the most vulnerable people.
Well, that's great news, Mark. Thank you. Finally, on this section then, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. It's regarding page 70, the petroleum licensing inspections. I had raised it before, but I'm very pleased to see you've now got 3 additional inspectors. So I presume then we're going to see quite a massive reduction in the outstanding numbers. Thank you.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So our petroleum target it runs over a 4-year programme. And absolutely, as you picked up earlier on in the year, as we've been recruiting, we've been training our specialist fire protection team up. We've had to prioritise where our resources were focused on, and they were alongside our statutory duties, which was linked in regards to our audits, in regards to our enforcement activities, and also in regards to our building regulation consultations. Now our team are established and they are coming through their training programme. We are absolutely seeing an increase in regards to all of our activities. So we are anticipating, particularly through our petroleum licensing, by the time we finish the 4-year programme, then we will be visiting all of the areas that we needed to.
Nigel.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to come back. It's not so much a question as an observation. I noticed there's 2 fire fatalities, and I'm sure you'd agree that that's too many. It's sad to see in this day and age people do not have working smoke alarms. It just goes to show how important these devices actually are. I mean, despite all the publicity, it's concerning that lots of people do not still have them in their homes.
Thank you. Did you want to say anything, Mark?
No, thank you for raising that, and it is an absolute opportunity to highlight the importance of smoke detections in all of our premises. As we've demonstrated today, it is smoke detection that raises the alarm at the very early stages of any fire that's developing, particularly in a domestic dwelling when seconds and minutes matter. Any fire detection that raises the alarm and enables people to get out of the property is going to be the first defence in saving lives.
Karen next, thank you. Then you.
Thanks. Mine's just a very basic question, because when you look, I think it's page 84, there's a list of flooding incidents over the last 5 years, and we all know it's worse over the last 2 or 3 years and getting worse. I just wanted to ask the question, does the amount of extra time and effort and resources that you have to put into flooding, is that having a marked impact on your abilities? I'm not saying that you're not dealing with fires and that in the proper way, but is it impacting on your ability to carry out other functions as well, primarily fires?
Our ability to respond to flooding incidents and our ability to respond to our statutory response duties, no, it isn't impacting us. We have the resources and the availability to be able to meet the current demand. There is and we'll touch on it, I'm sure, in the next paper in regards to flooding, but there is a longer increasing trend in regards to response to flooding incidents. We as a concept within the Fire and Rescue Service, we respond to any incident first come, first serve basis. We don't triage, we don't stack calls. If we get a call coming in, then we will respond to the nearest asset. What there would be an impact is when we've got protracted, sustained flooding events ongoing, it can, on some occasions, mean that we have a slower response to our fires, because it won't necessarily be the nearest station that will be attending, because they could be committed to a flooding incident. But then that's also just as relevant. They could also be committed to a road traffic collision or another fire or another one of the many incidents that we do get called to. So the reason why we have the 38 stations located across the county, and we have the duty patterns that we have, that we can always send resources, and we'll always send the nearest resources. But in high demand periods of time, then we can't always guarantee that it will be that nearest station.
Just to say, I'm sorry, I think I jumped an item there. I was reading down and I got that interested.
No, I think it does relate to the performance, of course, so that's why I let it go. Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to complement what Councillor Pepper has said, and I do sympathise with the fire brigade, because I think the fire alarms, a lot of tenants, they take them off because they like to smoke inside houses. And we had a discussion with one of our letting agencies in Boston, and I request that they will do probably a frequent visit to the houses, because I seen it with my eyes, people sitting and just smoking. So it is sometimes the fault of the people living in the houses. They're not abiding by the rules, and they're not doing the right thing for their own safety. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that concludes that section. So we'll move on to section 5, which is Libraries and Heritage, pages 72 to 76. 72 to 76. Everybody's very satisfied, I think, with the performance, because you always thrash this target, and that was probably my question before Anton comes in. Obviously, we are far exceeding the targets, and I think this has been asked before, but what are we doing about increasing the targets either now or perhaps in the new contract? Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual, isn't it, to be in a situation where you've got a service in the county council that is truly kicking it. And it is nice just to kind of pause, I think, and just reflect upon that. So with regards to the cultural services and the heritage assets, obviously we had a spectacular summer, even though the weather was not kind to us, with an astonishing concert promotion activity, and those concert promoters have asked to come back again next year to be able to deliver that. And I think it's also worth noting that actually 98.36% of how happy people are with the quality. So yes, we will continue to drive at that 1.4% of people who aren't quite enjoying that experience. So we do kind of continue to work that. I think it is also worth noting as well that, again, we had another spectacular bank holiday with the internationally renowned steampunk, and I would just like to take a moment to thank Councillor Brockway and particularly Councillor Corey in ensuring that that will happen again next year. They've both worked tirelessly with officers behind the scene and with partners to enable that from happening. So again, officer, thanks for that. With regards to libraries, I think it is important to note that we do continue to review those targets. They were set right at the beginning of our contract with our current provider, GLL. So they are somewhat out of date now, and we will review them as part of the recontracting that's going to start imminently next year, with the new contract starting in 2026. That's not to say that we don't continue to work with our provider to push them to continue to improve their service, to continue to improve engagement and accessibility. But I do think the fact that we are achieving such amazing target results doesn't mean that they are easy targets. I think it's a reflection on the provider and how well they are delivering, but also it's also a reflection, I think, on how vital libraries and community hubs are in our communities.
Thank you. And Lindsay, did you want to just say something?
Yes, I did. Nicole beat me to it. I was about to thank Councillor Brockway and our officers for supporting the Ministry of Steampunk to keep the weekend at the asylum in Lincoln for another year. I also wanted to extend my thanks to our officer team in culture services. We do have stretch targets. So we've heard with fire and rescue, they are ambitious, they are stretch targets. We do keep pushing. But the investment we're putting into the museum service, we want to make sure that we keep pushing those targets and we keep giving people in Lincolnshire and outside of Lincolnshire who come to visit us, that they've got something exciting and fresh to see, and that they can tell their family and friends about it. And the library service, as we've just heard, is a key component of community life in our smaller towns and larger villages, because without these community hubs, people wouldn't have that social contact. So we always say this, people might not be visiting our libraries as often, but they are taking more books out, but they are also visiting for more things like the knitting and natter and for coffee mornings and for that social contact. And this is really key. It might be soft, it might be not the big visual impact services that other departments have to deliver on, but that social capital that culture services delivers is enormous. So thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, Charlotte, do you want to just come back first?
Yes, thank you very much. So it was just very quickly to mention as well that obviously, as Councillor Corey's already suggested, that the libraries are such a huge community asset. What we are seeing now in particular post-pandemic is that actually the digital element of that is really beginning to grow. So whilst we obviously have our hubs and we have our core libraries, I think we can't underestimate the importance of the digital community as well. And in particular, the app that GLL have recently launched in the last sort of 12 to 18 months has been hugely successful, which actually links to our increased figures, particularly with regards to the website views, as they are all collated as one sort of digital communication. And as well with the issues as well. So we have the physical, but we also have digital. There's a really steady mix of sort of 70% physical items and 30% digital, and that hasn't plateaued really. If anything, it's increasing. So I think in terms of the community asset, whilst it's really important that we have the hubs and we have those physical activities, I don't think we can ignore the fact that actually the growing audience that we're seeing through digital is something that we're obviously building on as well. That was all.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. Well, it's good to know that they say you can't please all the people all the time. We're pleasing nearly all the people nearly all of the time, so that's excellent, really. Jackie, we've got you. If everybody could keep their questions short, please.
My comment's already been made, Chairman. I was going to thank the officers.
Great, thank you. Karen, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Councillor Corey, I think it's anything but a soft service delivery. I live in an urban area, and I appreciate most of the county is probably rural, but where I live, there is social deprivation, and that's a community hub, and it actually addresses many of the social isolation and social deprivation needs in the community that I represent, and that's actually really important. To me, it's more important than having a hole in the road filled in. I'm sorry, but it is. It absolutely is. And I want to say two things. First of all, I say huge thanks to all the volunteers, because without the volunteers, Ermine Library wouldn't run, and they're great. But actually, a huge, huge thank you to Bishop Grosseteste University for their commitment, their financial contribution, their dedication. They're just amazing, and they just go above and beyond. And I know you laugh at me because I'm always saying how wonderful that library is, but it is. It's the core of our community, and that's not just the Ermine East, it's the West, and people come from across Glebe Park. I'm in there for my surgery. I know what the reach is, and it makes a massive contribution to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That's your monthly promotion of the Ermine Library, which then we all join in and promote ours, but that's fantastic. So, Tom, you're next.
Thank you. I want to be nice as well, actually. No, it was. I was flicking through, and obviously only a sub to the committee. I hadn't realised that this included the heritage assets as well. And I think it's gone from strength to strength the last few years. And you see the events that go on each year and the turnouts that they get. It's absolutely fantastic. And despite all the difficulties in Lincoln with the tourism offer, the cancellation of the market, etc., I think it's, the heritage team have stepped in to really make sure we've got an offer on in the winter months. And I don't think this council shouts enough about the heritage team and how it's an integral part of what we do. So I'm a big supporter of the team and everything that you do, and I certainly think that I look forward to seeing it go to strength in the future.
Oh dear, we're getting too much praise, aren't we, for one department? Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a request really for going forward, if as a standard part of the information we get, could we have the number of libraries and the number of mobile libraries? Because I think that's an interesting fact to go with the numbers that you're getting to visit. Thank you.
Okay, Anton, briefly, please.
Thank you. I finished. The only thing which is I want to mention, because I have visited our local library in Boston, and I tell you, I was very pleased to see a diversity of clients, basically, and to see kids with their moms during the holidays. So it was nice to see that. It's quite nice. I was very happy with that. That's one thing. And I totally agree with everyone. What they have said is bring the communities together, and it's a good hub for everybody to come. It's warm. It's nice. You can bring a cup of coffee, sit down, read, check. Whatever you want to do, it's quite good. It's quite good. The only thing which is we had one issue with the Boston Library. They had, I think, some issues with their disability access. I don't know who is in charge of that to do anything about that. If you can advise me on that. Thank you.
Yeah, we recognise the limitations of the current library location in Boston, and we're working with property colleagues and also with other districts and also NHS partners to look at a more suitable location for a new, shiny and fully accessible library in the near future.
Thank you, Nicole. And finally in this section, Noi.
I would like to thank you. Do a wonderful job. I am members of, and occasionally I go, but I know you do different things now to bring different aid, a different group. But the lady who I give eye on, she got all the book, from the library to read because she cannot see. That's really good, and I congratulate you. But because we move on the time, and you did, and people not realize it, what behind the scene, how work hard you all are, how pouring sting to sting. I think is people not recognize before, like, oh, nobody want to go to the library. You don't need to get the book. Now the library got different things. I need the nut. I see they do clap and group sing. So it's a wonderful thing. And I think keep carry on, and whatever people in the chamber can support you, ask them to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Noi, and I think we're all universally agreed that you're doing a great job, but we shall find some more difficult questions for next time.
I feel we should call it to an end. No, end on a high there.
You're
Thank
setting
you
yourself
so
up.
much for the feedback.
Thank you, we appreciate it. And item 6 now, which is road safety, pages 76 to 78. We've got Stephen here, I think, for this. Jackie, and then Nigel.
I'll be as quick as I can, Chairman, but I have to ask this, and
I am asking people to keep the
yeah.
questions brief,
Right.
but I don't want to give the impression that we're rushing it through, because we're not. So.
Oh, thank you. I'm only teasing you. Right, this is actually quite a serious one, page 77. When I look at these statistics, I play around with them. I see, there was one, for instance, saying that there's no particular pattern, but you can find pattern within a lot of these statistics if you look hard enough. The one that really troubled me most isn't to do with pattern. It's page 77, and it's about children injured and killed on the road. When you look at those different figures, you think, oh, it's awful, and there was a spike in one particular quarter. But if you add them up, over the last 4 years, 4 school classes full of children, that equivalent number, have been killed or seriously injured in the roads in Lincolnshire, on the roads. When you look at the statistics like that, it's shocking. I sat and added them up twice. There's 120 children there, unless I'm reading something wrong. That's horrific. And because when you look at it, you see 4 and you think that's awful, but it doesn't sort of shock. You can understand that a couple of children might step out on the road, and it's awful, it's terrible. But when you actually put those numbers together, it's shocking. Am I reading that wrongly, or is that right? 120 children over 4 years killed or seriously injured on our Lincolnshire roads. You take that, that's 4 full school classes of children. Awful. So somebody talk to me about that, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Firstly, I'm going to have to stop going after libraries because that's quite a change in tone, isn't it? They've got all the good stuff. I think what I would say is that, fortunately, it's a relatively low number of children under the age of 15 that are actually killed in road traffic accidents. So that's the one good bit of news. I think proportionally, again, 0 to 15 children, when you look at the number of fatal and serious injury collisions every quarter, it makes up only a couple of percent. So again, they're the 2 good bits. But equally, we're here to protect the most vulnerable. We're here to protect the youngest. We want them to be nurtured and live long and happy lives, and we have to do all that we can to prevent that. Fortunately, the number of collisions that occur outside of schools, that occurs as pedestrians and pedal cyclists, are again proportionally pretty low. A significant number of those collisions and the injuries, the subsequent injuries, will be as passengers in cars. So that's a very different problem for us to be dealing with. But of course, what we need to do is make sure we educate parents and caregivers and anyone that is travelling with their families in them, and make sure that they keep their children as safe as possible. So proportionally, the numbers are low in comparison to the number of collisions we have in Lincolnshire. The problem isn't as obvious as you might think, in that we're thinking that pedestrians and pedal cyclists, for example, are getting knocked over all the time. It's more that there is passengers in vehicles, and that's a problem we need to deal with. And the final point I would make is that because again it's fatal and serious, a broken digit in a hand would be considered a serious injury in a road traffic collision. So whilst again it is not good and we want to improve it, it doesn't necessarily mean, for example, that child was knocked off a pedal cycle and on life support. There's a wide range in there.
I think we may have been thinking that it was life-changing injuries when we see the word serious, so that's explained that. Not that it makes it any better, but it perhaps puts it in context. Thank you. Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's pleasing to see we're not top of the table anymore, or should I say, in reality, that's bottom of the table, isn't it? There's 4 other counties which have got higher figures than ourselves. But my question was, and I'm sure Steve's been asked it before, we're nearly coming to the end of 2024, and the benchmarking's at December 2022. I just wonder why we hadn't got, say, for instance, December 2023 figures as opposed to 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pepper. To the first point, I think it is worth highlighting that, as I've talked about many times at this committee, the makeup of our road network, the size of it, the types of roads that we have and the types of road users combined do mean that we tend to have a higher number of people killed and seriously injured on our roads in our area than in other areas. But of those comparative counties that we do have the graph against, we have moved from being the worst to 5th, I think, overall on KSIs in total, and 12th for children's injuries. So again, that is an improving situation. I think it's worth noting that. As to the data that we use, we are pretty much up to date now within 6 weeks for all of the collisions that happen in Lincolnshire and the Stats 19 forms that are submitted by the police. So that's slights, fatals and serious. However, at the end of the year, we submit all of our data once verified to the Department for Transport, as do all the other authorities. That's then collated and reports are then sent out nationally, so we can then start to make the comparisons you see in these tables and in our annual report. So in reality, the 2002 data comes out more than a year later. So for 2023, it's going to be either back end of 24, early into 25 before we start making those comparisons. So that's why you have a bit of delay.
Thank you. We had Anton, finally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will make it brief. I have 2 questions. The first one is regarding cycling. And what I've seen, there's a lot of kids now are cycling from schools to their homes without any protective equipment. So there's no helmet, there is nothing. So just, cycling as normal. On the top of that, they are speeding in town centers, and that is happening all the time. That's one thing. The second thing, and this is from an experience, a car was stopped in the marketplace in Boston, and it was stopped because the kids at the back, 3 kids, didn't have any seat belts. When they checked, the car didn't have any MOT, didn't have a road tax, didn't have insurance, and there were 2 parents with the kids. And this is occurring now often in the town. And I do work with the police very closely to if there is anything like that, we inform the police and we talk to them. However, it's still occurring. Is there anything else we can do to prevent these things from happening? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danny. I think on the first point, we provided road safety education to 27,000 pupils in Lincolnshire in the last academic term, and I think that is the place in which we need to make sure that we educate them about the need for protective clothing and the consequences if they don't. And I think that's relevant both when they're in primary school and they're first starting out, although obviously parental input's much more high, but also equally important that that's reinforced as they start to have greater independence at secondary school. maybe cycling further, but also faster on larger bikes. So that's something that we'll continue to do, and I think that is the main areas through education on this particular topic. The problem that you've highlighted there in the town centre, again, education's a significant piece. If people don't understand the legislation, why they need to have children in the appropriate car seats, and how they do that, how do they comply properly, then that's a big issue. So we continue to highlight those areas of concern, put out campaigns and make people aware. Fire and Rescue Service, through the Road Safety Partnership, attending events and doing demonstrations and putting out information on the Good Egg Project. All of those things occur. But there does come a time when it comes down to enforcement then. We need to make sure that there is a visible police presence at areas of highest concern, and these types of things that are going to impact on the safety of others and of the people who are driving is taken care of, and that if there are offences, that they are enforced.
Do you put any pressure on schools? Because the kids are leaving from the school, within the school, without any safety. So, I mean, as I say, do you put any pressure on the schools to make sure that the kids will have their equipment, safety equipment with them before leaving the school?
Yeah, I don't think we're in a position to put pressure on, but we're certainly in a position to work with them in partnership and to make sure that they have the relevant information. We will send road safety officers into the schools to deliver education and lessons. We're more than happy to assist with literature and material, online learning, and provide that to the schools if they don't have the time in their curriculum to dedicate it to road safety. And we're more than happy to send that information through the school to all parents and guardians as well. So that's the approach we try to take.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll move on now to volunteering, pages 78 to 80. Any questions on that? Volunteering. Noi. So we're just going to go back.
Yeah. I would like to say I was quite impressed and interested because I got a chance to meet Steve last week to do with issue with the school, traffic, and same with Ang Thong say. But I think you have to tell the school, it's a whole pair from the Steve team to come to school. He just tell me they send someone now to explain to the school because they ask for some road crossing and that. They might not qualify to have it, but the road safety and Steve team can advise and tell you what to do. I was so impressed. I would like to say thank you. You should tell all the school in your area, contact them, and they will send an officer to tell you what can be done. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. Thank you. I think, well, Stephen, that's a bit of praise for you at the end there then. So we'll move on to volunteering, pages 78 to 80. Any questions on volunteering? Lee's here if we have any. Oh, Anton.
Mr. Chairman, it's very brief. It's just a comment. I meet one of our volunteers in our area, which is litter picking and cleaning, and we do that probably on a daily basis. And the lady, she told me, Anton, we're living in modern slavery. We are slaves. You know, we retired to be happy. Now we're cleaning our streets. It's just a comment from the public. Some of them, how they see this volunteering job, because basically they pay taxes, they pay council taxes and all of these for somebody to do the job for them. However, they end up, you know, cleaning their own street. It's quite good what we do in our streets. I'm not, you know, but that was a comment from someone. So I just want to share it with you.
Lee, I don't really want to come back on that.
So, I mean, the volunteering provision isn't there to replace jobs or services that are delivered through other mechanisms, but clearly there's a wide range of volunteering opportunities, and some of that includes environmental volunteering opportunities, which include litter picks and the like. So it's part of community cohesion, it's part of developing strong communities and presenting the best place. Within Boston, as an example, there is a number of environmental volunteering schemes that are offered and supported through the voluntary sector, and it may well be that ladies involved in that sort of activity. But to be really clear, none of it is established to replace services or jobs that would be typically paid for through taxation or through any other mechanism.
Thank you, Lee. In Heckington, where I live, we have very active litter pickers who pick up huge volumes of litter. And the argument should be, really, if it wasn't dropped in the first place, nobody'd have to pick it up. But they do, and they do an amazing job. So I'm sure there's lots of examples of that around the county. So thank you
Well, it's do with volunteer. I like to say, my Pali Council area, they have volunteer to do litter picking and the speed awareness. And some Pali area council, they have to buy their equipment to go pick up the thing what people throw on the side of the road. It only pays in the job. The dustbin man only delivered the bin in the bin area, but in lower area, the resident and the volunteer got to do the job, and that should be thankful. You have these people turn out in a rainy day on the weekend to do the job. Thank you.
Okay, Karen.
Chair, I would say we've been going 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I know we've had a bit of a break, but I think maybe going forward, if we all want to go in by tea time, it might be an idea if we have one contribution each today.
Thank you very much, Chairman. You mentioned Boston, Lee. I just wondered if any further feedback from the qualification that the college were developing in volunteering, because obviously this provides big opportunities for certain people to get into paid employment. So it's not just about doing things, extras. It actually provides experience for people to get into full-time employment.
Yeah, so in terms of the college qualification itself, no additional feedback beyond what was shared last time. Engagement is continuing through colleges, and that's started to expand. So the VCS are doing a number of sessions through Lincoln College, again promoting volunteering and opportunities, and they're working with other providers to start to bring that through. Qualification is still going, qualification is still doing what is set out to do, but nothing beyond what we shared last time.
Thank you, Rob. We are going to move on now. So that is the end of the questions and comments and concludes the discussions of that item. So I propose we accept the report and record our satisfaction with the public protection and communities service level of performance for Q2 of this year. Could you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we'll move on to item 7, which is the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Attendance at Flooding Incidents Annual Report on Performance up to March 24. On pages 83 to 92 of the agenda, an update on the flooding incidents that Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue has attended since 2019. Our actions are to review the contents and comment on the approach of the fire service to supporting local communities. And we're going to have a short presentation from Mark.
Thank you very much, Councillor Key. So this is more of a longer term analysis in regards to the impact of flooding purely for the response from fire and rescue. It's just worth stating out at the beginning that there's far much more work that's done in regards to the world of flooding, particularly for our local lead flood authority that Lincolnshire County Council undertakes. But this report is purely going to be focusing on fire and rescue activities. And I think it's important to recognise the reason why we focus on this, because it isn't an activity that is a statutory duty of fire and rescue services to perform. We are well placed to be able to respond to flooding incidents, and over a number of years fire and rescue has been funded through training and equipment by Lincolnshire County Council to ensure that we can respond appropriately to our local communities. And the reason why that's important, because as we see over a longer period, the demand for flooding has increased for fire and rescue activities. We've gone from a 5-year period several years ago where we was averaging around 90 flooding incidents a year where we responded. The trend now is that's increased to around about 214 incidents per year over a 5-year period. So the demand is increasing. We've done some detailed analysis on where those flooding incidents are, when they occur, and the type of response that is required. Although there is a longer term trend of increasing, we do recognise that there are spikes in various years at various times, and that does always, and rightly so, catch the interest and focus for ourselves and our communities, but we've tried to step back and actually look at that long-term trend. So in the last few years, we know we've had spikes. areas in regards to times of year that have either been round about in the October time, the January time, and the June and July time, all from different severe weather events that have created flooding issues across the county. There is a map also within the pack that really kind of identifies where our, and I'll use the word hotspots of flooding are. What I would say about that is flooding occurs pretty much in all areas of the county. So I think it's important to recognising that all of our fire stations do have flooding capability to be able to respond. Our kit and equipment that we provided for our crews is appropriate for them to be able to work in flooding conditions, and we have always strategically located some of our specialist flooding equipment to ensure that they are in the right place. However, we do have, and I'll use the word hotspots within the county, and they are predominantly around our more higher established areas within the county. They are in our main towns and larger village areas, which is not a surprise in regards to, because we are responding to people's houses and the floodings, and particularly at high risk, life risk. I think it's also worth noting in regards to that our strategy in regards to our response is that we will always focus and respond asset to where we class a life risk incident. So if anybody does report flooding within their premise, then we will always be sending assets to those properties if we deemed it as a life risk. However, we do respond more and more by giving flood advice or sending an officer to assess to see what the most appropriate resource is there to be able to respond to those incidents. And then the final areas that it does give a list of the specialist assets that we do have available through in fire and rescue. Unsurprisingly, the most use asset that we have is our fire appliances, our pumping appliances that still go there to pump water and move more water away from premises. But we do have an increased use of our high volume pumps that there are for sustained periods and when there's extremely large amounts of water that need to be moved. And also the flood pumps that we've been invested in, which has been specific investment from LCC, that we have now 5 flood pumps across the county, and they are getting more and more increased usage, so they are seeing the value of that investment as well. I'll pause at that point, Councillor, so I'm available for any questions in regards to where we are.
Thank you. I think Lindsay's just going to make a short comment.
It will be a short comment. Thank you. I wanted to thank everyone at Fire and Rescue for how they've responded to the increase in flooding. We've heard with the number of flooding calls they receive has more than doubled. It is a lot of pressure, but it's one that we are resourced to respond to. But I also want to pay thanks to our colleagues in the control room, because how they respond and how they handle calls, particularly in spate conditions, it's incredibly stressful. So it's not just the teams that go out on the ground responding with the fire appliances and the pumps. It's also the teams in control as well, coordinating it and responding to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Paul.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd just like to congratulate the service on actually developing their response to the flooding situation. It has come a long way in a short time, and it doesn't happen by accident at all. That it's done by a measured response to all parts of the service, and a big thank you to all of the service. I mean, I was at Babette on the day of Babette. I was actually up in your office, Mark, and I've never seen water like that in living in Lincolnshire all my life. So there we go.
Thank you. On Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I want to say, probably just what Councillor Skinner has said. I mean, you are doing a great job, and I think we feel safer by hearing that you are improving your services and dealing with the issues, you know, appropriately and in the right time. The only thing it comes to my mind now is to look at what happens in Valencia and Spain. It's a shock. It comes so quick. It's not something that probably we can be prepared for. However, we are doing our best, and I think we have our trust in our fire brigade here in Lincolnshire, and that they are doing a good job. And I will just quote something which is that's about the fire rescue. It was in America. I think one of their chiefs once said that we prepare ourselves every year with the best equipment, with the best training. However, the fire always comes in different ways, so we have to fight it. And as I say, I'll just pray to God that we keep us safe, and and we all work together, to help our communities and help ourselves, to be safe. That's all we can do. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Anton. And I think we all agree after what we saw on the news in Spain. Just shows that flooding can happen anywhere, and as that map shows, it's all over the county, Mark. So again, thank you from this committee for all you're doing. Karen.
I think as well we have to remember that there's an inescapable link between climate change and flooding, and we have to bear that in mind. When we look at environment and economy and things like green energy, it's all right saying, well, we'll slow it down a little bit and maybe we won't do that, but this is the impact and this is the end result of climate change, and we have to remember that.
Mark, did you want to conclude the item?
Yeah, so if we could just pick up on a couple of the kind comments. So thank you very much for the feedback, and please be assured that will be fed back in to all of our teams, and particularly thank you, Councillor Corey, in regards to highlighting the work that our control do, often unseen and often unheard, but actually they are the first point of call for all of our response, and they do a sterling job. I think we was all shocked to see the events that played out in Spain, and there's going to be clearly an awful lot of learning that we will take internationally in regards to not be complacent in regards to, well, that's happened in Spain, that couldn't happen here. We will always take the attitude is, what can we learn from such tragic events happening internationally? The one thing I will say now that within the UK, and we know that we've got a strong link within Lincolnshire, how we work with the Met Office and the Environment Agency and all the multi-agencies to be able to ensure that we do have close monitoring in regards to weather events that are coming over the country. But we will absolutely be part of that international learning. And then my final point, and I know that we are focusing on flooding, but the comment in regards to climate change is a very real risk for us as a fire and rescue service in regard to our response. And so when we're talking about severe weather, we know we are increasingly responding to significant impacts of increased heat, prolonged periods of hot, dry weather. So we need to make sure that we're training our crews and they've got the right equipment to be able to deal with the opposite end of the impacts of climate, which is actually those prolonged heat periods as well.
Sorry, Mark, there was one more question from Nigel, which I didn't see you put your hand up, Nigel. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was going to offer praise as well, Chairman, but I think I've had enough for one day, so I'll just mention something else. But I was a little bit surprised to see Spalding topping the table there on the flooding-related incidents by station, ground and financial year. I guess that's perhaps a coincidence, or I don't know if there's any underlying reasons for that. And for fear of making a fool of myself, I couldn't quite work the table out there on page 89. If we look at the second one down, Skegness, it's got all the colours there of the 5 different years, but Spalding's on there twice, like some other stations are on there twice, with they're right at the top and Spalding's further down here, just with the last year on there. Just couldn't work the table out, but I'm sure that's just me, Chairman.
In regards to Spalding, it's about all of our flooding responses. So, and again, I will dig deeper into the details, but so the fact that we'll get lots of calls and we're giving flood advice and we're linking in there doesn't necessarily mean that we get a response going through to that area. So within that period, and the fact that within this 5-year period we've had a couple of really significant flooding events does spike some areas that would probably normally think, well, that seems a little bit disproportionate. So I will dig out a bit more of the data in regards to that, but it would be more likely to do with the amount of calls we've had coming into that area. Doesn't necessarily transcend in regards that we've had to send a flood response asset to that area.
Thank you. Well, I think that concludes the discussion of that item, and I propose that we've reviewed the report and endorsed the fire services approach to supporting our local communities. Could you please raise your hands if you agree? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, the work programme for this committee on pages 93 to 98, our programme for the rest of this council year. Tracy, we'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have no amendments to report to the work programme. The next meeting of the committee is on the 21st of January. Members will be considering the revenue and capital budget proposals for 2025-26 before executive on the 4th of February. There will also be the Grenfell Tower Phase 1 and Phase 2 reports with recommendations to fire and rescue authorities, an annual update on the Lincolnshire Local Resilience Forum business plan, and an update as well on the Greater Lincolnshire Coronial Service merger. And then sitting as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee, you'll be considering a pre-decision scrutiny item on the domestic abuse strategy. And after that, there will then be the final meeting of this council term for the committee on the 25th of February. I'm happy to take any suggestions. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Tracy. I think we all note that report. Nobody has anything to say. Oh, Anton.
Chairman.
You're never a bother,
Oh,
Anton.
sure. Okay, that's good. The only thing which is I would like, because come to my attention, because I will keep this one, I think, I'm not going to mention where it is. Can we get any update on asbestos? Because it's very interesting. The reason why I think some places in Boston, they have asbestos in, and I think the orders is not to dig any walls in that place, not to put anything, to be very careful, and it's a place where there's a lot of people on a daily basis. So I would like to have some, and I can share with you that's probably the secret sometime if you would like to, but I would like to know what's our situation on asbestos, because we talk about the green towel, we're going to get some information about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll raise that with officers and see if we can maybe just have a brief paper or something like that on it. But it's just whether it's this committee or whether this all comes under the property side of things, whether it be then like a view screen management board. But I'll look into it and see where it sits, and we'll get an update for you.
Anton, are you talking about when buildings are demolished or?
There is buildings which is still in use now, and they just found that they have an issue with asbestos. So the orders and the information given to everyone is not to touch the walls, not to drill the walls, not to put anything in the walls.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll look into that. Right. So, did we vote on that? No, we haven't. If you're all happy with the work programme, just raise your hand, please. Thank you. Yeah. So that's all passed. Now, item number 9, I have to do this first. Item 10 on the agenda contains exempt information, and we will now need to vote on whether we go into private session. I propose this motion, and I have to read it out in full, that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of the schedule 12A of the Act. Do I have a seconder? Paul? We'll now vote on this motion. You are voting now on whether you support the motion to exclude the press and public for the remainder of the meeting. Please raise your hand if you agree. That's unanimous. So we'll just pause now while the live stream is turned off. We will not be having a break.